We've looked at a lot of cosmic and out there concepts in the series before. If somehow this is your first video in the series, they say every video is someone's first, this is how I fixed World of Warcraft for a TTRPG. Because TTRPGs and MMOs have a different sense of scale of the world. Sure, tabletop game masters often have no sense of scale any better than your typical fantasy writer, but in general, a world you see in a tabletop is often much bigger than one you see in an MMO, or any video game. Because when you're playing a video game, you have to get to a place in a reasonable time frame. You can't be walking for literal days in a video game, because no one would play that. Unless it's Daggerfall, which wants you to use fast travel all the time, and then kills you in the middle of it. Daggerfall might be a little bit too old even for me. When you're in a role-playing game at a table with friends or on a Discord server, as the case may be for our group, the world can be as big as it needs to be. The world can be as big as an actual planet, because you can just skip the boring parts. And I guess it's similar in that way to the Daggerfall fast travel systems. It just feels different in a video game. Either way, because of this issue, because of having to compress the world into a playable space for a video game, Azeroth represented in World of Warcraft is much smaller than the quote-unquote real Azeroth would be. So the question becomes, how big Azeroth really is? This is where I'm going to skip a few steps and direct you to another video by someone else, or at least borrow some of his calculations. And that video is The True Size of Azeroth, the Planet, Revealed by Bellular. This is how I read the clickbait titles in my head. It's much more entertaining this way. And I'm not the biggest fan of Bellular. On all his blatant clickbait titles and recently blatantly lying thumbnails. But this video is actually good. He actually does have some serious investigation, serious comparisons, and some good math to arrive at what I think is a reasonable number. Kind of. Well, off by orders of magnitude, but 1 second. If you don't want to go to his video for whatever reason, here's the short summary of his first result. By comparing the size of Sargeras' sword in Silithus in-game, and its apparent size in comparison to the planet in the kinematics, he arrives at the estimation that Azeroth has the diameter of roughly 12,026 meters, which is about 1,000 times smaller than Earth. What Bellular gets out of that is that Azeroth is actually 1,000 times smaller than Earth. But if we try to immerse ourselves in the world and imagine it as an actual planet, there is a very simple conclusion we can draw from that. Azeroth, we see in-game, is about a 1 to 1,000 representation of the quote-unquote real Azeroth. Obviously not everything is evenly scaled. People and individual buildings are 1,000 times larger than in the game. But say Goldshire. Yes, Goldshire jokes. Put them in the comments. Goldshire isn't made up of 4 buildings and 50 people. It has 4,000 buildings and maybe 50,000 people. Maybe that number is too big, but you get the idea. All the distances, all the landforms are 1,000 times bigger in the lore version of Azeroth. And that is the scale that I decided to run with in my game. That is the scale I had in mind when I was making my map of Azeroth. I took some of the lore maps of the world, and to give the map the proportions a real map would have, I extended the map to the east and created a whole big empty space. I'd have to either stretch the continents really far apart in a way that would make it inconsistent with prior portrayals, or I had a whole huge space to work with. So with my decision to put Pandaria back where it was hinted to exist before Cataclysm, I had the space to add a bunch more continents with other themes. And from that, Yoakan and Varsha and Nusantara were born. And there was another issue with the geography as it shaped itself in front of me in the process of designing this. You see, the climate of Azeroth isn't very consistent, but there is a general trend. Generally, zones to the south are warmer and more tropical or subtropical. You find more deserts and jungles in the south. Now, in the real world, this is caused by writers copying patterns from fictional settings and the Eurocentric upbringing. We see the South as being warmer because our culture was built on European roots, with the Sahara and the jungles of Central Africa acting like a hard barrier to our exploration for centuries. And not blaming them from that. We are the total sum of our experiences and our upbringing, but this creates a very strange, lopsided climate. I was tempted to add a lot more space on Azeroth. Say that everything we know in World of Warcraft was just in the northern hemisphere, or about. That the equator runs somewhere around Kazan or Stranglethorn. And to be realistic with the climate, that's your solution. However, it still posed some design issues. First off, I had a lot more space than I knew what to do with. I didn't really need all this space down here. Secondly, it didn't feel right to shove it all in this tiny space. It doesn't feel to me like this is what it was supposed to be. Thirdly, it made all the existing continents and zones relatively small. If I kept the continents this size, each zone was about the size of a country in the real world, and that is ultimately the metric that was the most important to me. So this is the map I went with. And there is still that climate issue. Now, I know the first answer that comes to most people's minds is, it's magic. But I hate that answer. I hate how often in fantasy things are dismissed or hand-waved away because it's magic. Okay, it's magic, but what magic? Where is this magic coming from? Who's casting it? What's supporting it? Where is all the energy sustaining the maelstrom coming from? This thing is churning out more energy than the total electric consumption of the entire modern-day Earth. Where is all this energy coming from? It's always bugged me. The maelstrom thing bugged me, but the lazy cop-out answer of it's magic bugs me even more. I would feel dishonest with myself if I rested on that. I tried to look into realistic systems that would lead to this kind of lopsided climate. Can planets have a warm pole and a cold pole? One possibility is a tide-locked planet. But when the warm pole wouldn't be tropical, it would be over the boiling point of water hot, and the cold pole would be astronomically cold. And Azeroth very obviously isn't tidally locked. We have days and nights, and we've seen it rotate from space, so this can't be the answer. Maybe it's a very high axial tilt. Maybe the axis of rotation just points very nearly towards the sun. But if that is the case, the warm and the hot pole would switch every half a year. Stranglethorn would stay tropical only for half the year, and then get northern cold for the other half. That is obviously not what's happening. And to keep the same pole pointing south, there would have to be a source of torque, some kind of energy turning the axis constantly with the same rate as the yearly orbit. But then what is the source of that energy? We go back to the same problem. Truth be told, I still don't have a real answer for this. Ultimately, the design goals here won out over realism, but I still don't feel right about having this issue. One kind of cheeky answer for this is goblins. Yeah, blame the goblins. Because you see, you know what's near the southern pole? Kazan. And what do goblins love to do? Pollute. That's right, greenhouse gases, all concentrated near the southern pole, distorting the whole planet's climate. Is that a real and serious answer? Maybe not, but it's better than nothing. All that said, there is one thing that has to be said about Azeroth as presented in the game. It is demonstrably flat. And I'm not talking about just being able to see Mount Hyjal from Silithus, which is half a planet away, and should be hidden by so much planet curvature that it's not even funny. Given the scale of a real planet, you shouldn't be able to see the peak of Hyjal from even Dark Whisper Gorge at the feet of the zone in WoW. And yes, that came up in our game. I'm also talking about other things like It's always the same time of day everywhere. Whether you're in Kalimdor or Northrend or in Eastern Kingdoms, it's always dawns and sets at the same time. And this is how it would work on a real flat world. You hear me, flat earthers? No bullshit about perspective and the spotlight sun. If the world was flat, day and night would work like they do in WoW. Obviously, the real Azeroth isn't actually flat. We've seen it from space, for one. So while it doesn't come up often, because we rarely need to talk to someone halfway across the world, I have indeed made time zones. So while it's 8 AM on the Crusher Island, it's 11 AM in Stormwind, 3 AM in Orgrimmar, and 5 PM in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. And by pure luck, one time zone appears to be centered right around Kazan. So, I can blame goblins once again. And Kazan is the GMT of Azeroth. Many people would probably say to all this, well, you don't need to do any of this. You could just ignore all the inconsistencies and just take it at a face value. Sure, I could. But it broke my immersion to design the world for my game and ignore these issues. I think it makes the world much more interesting and much more real when you really get into all this. I could also spend hours trying to rethink the sea currents and the tectonics of the world, try to really get into the hardcore world building that people can do on occasion. That is, however, where I draw the line myself. If I really got into that, I would have to change so much about the world. Sea currents would change a lot of the climate all over the planet. Tectonics would reshape the continent so much that at some point it would stop looking like the Azeroth we know. And that is ultimately my constraint in this project. When the designers of the MMO had to make some compromises to make it playable space in a video game, I had to make some compromises to make it still feel like Azeroth. To make it still feel like WarCraft. To have it still be recognizable as the world we used to know. So I didn't go into sea currents or tectonics or realistic population distributions or placement of minerals. Like, what minerals would we even be placing? Like iron, mithril, azurite? This is the line I had to draw in this project. When I design for other worlds, be they made completely by me, or ones where I have a lot of more freedom, like Abir from the Forgotten Realms, I can really go wild with that. But alas, here, I couldn't really. So, that is my look at the geography and climate and even time zones of Azeroth. While the video on the empty spaces or the void realm is still waiting for my game's resolution on the topic, I want to give you the voice on what you want to see next. Do you want to see me rant about the designs of a specific continent, or the history of a specific race? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because every little bit helps the channel. Just like the coffee page linked in the video description, just saying. I hope to see you next time to talk about more of our crazy world designs. Koronakai Christo! Am I trying to make a catchphrase? Let's not make it a catchphrase. Goodbye!